Welcome to Soul-Led Creative Women, the podcast for heart-centered creative women who are ready to reclaim their spark and live with deeper meaning, authenticity, and soul. So today I have Kristan Swan with me. Kristan is a business coach turned life and spiritual guide devoted to helping people come home to themselves. Kristan's work invites you to explore your deepest truths, question the beliefs you've inherited, and reconnect with the inner wisdom you may have been taught to ignore. She believes that curiosity is one of the most powerful tools we have, a way to approach our lives with openness, creativity, and compassion. So welcome, Kristan.
Thank you so much, Sam. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
So let's just start with your story. Tell us about your journey and how creativity has featured in your life.
Creativity has been such a through line for me to learn about myself. And I really only put that together fairly recently, but I grew up always kind of doing projects and doing a lot of things with my hands, whether it was creating little beading things or needlepoint or anything like that, cooking. Um, and so then that kind of, as I got into school, that translated more into the visual arts. And I actually, when I graduated from college, one of my degrees was in fine art. And I
Okay.
did printmaking. Um, and even within that, I love I feel like a lot of my creative exploration is it working within a medium, but then kind of pushing the boundaries of that
Mm-hmm.
medium
Mm-hmm.
too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, there's also printmaking in particular, I loved because I was making my own plates. So I started when I first started, I was using the metal plates and
Mm-hmm.
doing that type of printmaking, but then I realized I could make plates out of fabric and leaves and layering and,
Mm-hmm.
um, creating in medium and letting that dry and just kinda creating my own world on this
Mm-hmm.
plate, and sometimes I would layer it too thickly. I don't know how well versed you are in the print process, but you soak your paper in water so that it has a bit of give to it. But sometimes when you're going through the press, and if I had too much happening in my plate, then it would bust through the paper. But like kind of stretching that, and then I started adding elements of I've always loved taking photos. And so back in the day, I was taking them on a where I was actually developing the film, and
Mm-hmm.
then later on, having them, developed at either just for the ease of using them in the collage process that I
Mm-hmm.
was weaving them in. So it's there's always been this element of creating for me, and it was what it was doing that I didn't realize until more recently was giving me so much information about who I was.
Mm.
Yeah. And so now my primary medium is writing.
Okay.
And although I've always been a voracious reader, I don't even remember learning to read because I just remember always knowing how to read.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in as much as admire authors and just, can completely become captivated by the written word, that the idea of writing myself, although it was appealing, it didn't feel like something that I could do.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas now it does feel like
Mm-hmm.
it's a medium that I can explore because I feel like I now have enough understanding again of myself
Mm-hmm.
that I can translate in a way that makes sense, hopefully, most of the
Yeah.
time in words, right?
The wisdom of age, right?
Right. I know. So, yeah, so before it was all these other, and then I had a business landscape doing landscape design, and again, kind of bringing that creative element of for other people, creating these
Mhm,
spaces that
mhm,
really took, and that was kind of an interesting process when I thought about the essentially what I'm taking is kind of what's in their mind's eye and
mhm,
and turning it into a physical reality.
mhm. Yeah, beautiful. So, I mean, it sounds like you've had quite a creative journey, both from a work perspective and also from a personal perspective, you know? So,
Yeah.
as you've navigated these creative shifts that you've experienced, how has that transformed your creative identity along the way? Do you know? You know what I mean? So, like, obviously, if you're starting out as a fine artist and landscape designer, and then you're moving into business coaching and maybe doing some personal creativity, and then you're, doing this more spiritual based coaching that you're doing now, how has that really impacted the way you see yourself as a creative and your identity?
Well, where I am at this moment is are you familiar with Carol Dweck's work? She wrote she wrote the book
Okay,
Mindset,
I've heard,
and
yeah, the growth
she's
mindset. Yeah.
the growth mindset.
Yeah, yeah.
And so much of the emphasis for people who are not familiar with that is that how much more we learn by kind of going back and correcting our mistakes, or not thinking just because we didn't do something well that is something that we can never do
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
right?
Mm, mm.
That we're supposed to have these talents, right? That are just immediately recognizable or they're not. And how we can limit ourselves, right? By not allowing for that exploration within failure,
Yeah.
essentially.
Mhm, mhm.
And and that book really spoke to me when I first read it, and it was initially geared I was reading it as a parent, and it was geared for elementary, kinda K through 12,
Mhm,
elementary school. But it made complete sense to me for so many different for business, for your personal life, for adults, and I believe she has now expanded her work to
yeah.
include all these things. So I love that idea of the exploration, and I think that that's one of the things that a creative endeavor allows us to do, and almost encourages us, right, in
Mhm,
ways that
mhm,
sometimes other things feel more strict, right? You're
mhm,
going to, if you're I mentioned that I used to develop photos in a dark room, and you're always playing with how long you've got it in the different baths, and
mhm.
so you are essentially in that moment, you're not thinking of it as failure, essentially. You're experimenting,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm,
And so as I mentioned now, I like this idea of what does a creative mindset look like? So if we've embraced the idea of a growth mindset, is there kind of the next step, which is the, really a creative mindset, which for me, kind of aside from my artistic endeavors, really a way of interacting with the world and also interacting with myself that is suggesting that there is an expansiveness to the universe, and that there is this kind of this realm of possibility that
mhm.
is available, I feel like, to everyone,
Yeah.
if we're if we're interested in meeting it.
Yeah, and willing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so do you think that maybe that's something, that growth mindset concept and this kind of like embracing the journey, rather than being fixed on, having a particular creative identity and sticking with it. Do you think that's something that maybe you struggled with early on? Is that part of your journey, or is that something that you've always been able to embrace?
I think I've always been able to I have both. Let's
Yeah.
say
Okay.
yes, yes, and because I've always been able to embrace the journey, in the sense that I think that even as a child, I was aware of the information and
Hmm.
and in the introduction, you mentioned curiosity, which is such a big part of my life. So I think that there was always this real curiosity that was
Hmm.
natural. So it was embracing all sorts of experiences and information and definitely there were times when, especially as a young adult, I was looking around at my friends at school or other, colleagues and who's I just I so wanted to be them in that I wanted to be sure about something. And
Sure.
in terms of like a career path or I just especially in a professional sense, because I think as a young adult after you finish school, there's everyone's like, okay, what are you gonna do now? Right. And so, yeah, there's definitely been moments where I wish that I was that person who had it all figured out and knew
Hmm.
what the outcome was, right?
Hmm.
But I don't know if that's me.
Yeah. Yeah. Just embracing who you really are. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. So I believe that our creative evolution, our creative identities and our creative journey is operating in duality or in tandem with our spiritual evolution, right? They
Mhm.
feed and mirror each other. Has that been
Yeah.
your experience too?
Oh, absolutely. As I, d- so for me, I feel like that, that that spiritual side of me did not, although it always existed, it was at um it was at a not a superficial level because I always felt it very deeply, this idea that and this connection even to something that is bigger than myself, which is
Yeah.
kind of my simplistic
Yeah.
um definition of my
Yeah.
spirituality. Um But it has only been through these different creative endeavors, and I would include, starting a business and growing a
Hmm.
business as a
Hmm.
very creative endeavor for so it's only through those moments and experiences, but also doing kind of the time or taking the time to reflect about where I am and kind of integrating these lessons into myself and into my understanding of myself, I guess is a better way of saying that. That I feel like for me, I had to really get to know myself before I could then have a more mature relationship with my spirituality,
Hmm.
if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Hmm. And do you think that your creativity has matured alongside, that spiritual maturity?
In a way, I mean, I was saying that I write now and I I
That
mean,
seems very
I
grown
don't
up.
I mean, it seems grown up, but I mean, if you read some of the stuff I write, it probably doesn't seem very
Okay.
grown up. And I think I am at this point, I'm willing to have fun with it. I'm willing not
Mhm.
to I don't wanna take myself too seriously. I do know that when I first was just even contemplating being a fine artist for, my career path, I couldn't do it because
Mhm.
I was I was too intimidated by what I thought you had to be as
Mm.
an artist,
Mhm.
and I also don't know that my work would have been that interesting, really, because for me, I feel like the most successful, especially when you're talking about paintings, printmaking,
Mm-hmm.
photography,
Mm-hmm.
the most successful works are those that are sharing an a piece of the person, right?
Yes, yes.
Is a glimpse into their heart, and that then allows for that conversation to happen with the viewer that
Mm.
really is a reminder of kind of these universal truths too.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I think that's kind of
I
what I mean by maturity as well. I think, it's kind of like it's actually this inner wisdom, and
yeah,
that's got to be reflected in your creative output as well as obviously your spiritual journey. So yeah, it's
right.
really
And
powerful.
I feel like I was way too scared
Yeah.
to be
Be
that,
vulnerable.
to be vulnerable. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a
And
bravery in it, isn't there?
mhm. And I think especially when for me too, there that vulnerability felt very scary because, if I were to be a working artist, I would need to show my work, right? So obviously I'm sharing it with the world.
Yeah.
And eventually, there's, critique of it. And then also there's that the the money piece that
Yeah.
there is, you I think you have to be pretty well, let's just say I was not in a place where I could probably manage the disappointment of either a negative criticism
Hmm.
or also kind of that that binding of kind of dollars
Yeah.
to my
Creativity.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tricky thing, I think, and it's definitely, again, it comes down to mindset, at the end
Yeah.
of the day, right? And you need a
Yeah.
certain amount of wisdom and life experience and, trust within yourself in order to make that happen.
Yes.
So, yeah, I completely agree. I can see that like your work is heavily focused, as you mentioned, on writing, but also, journaling, as a form of creative expression for growth and transformation. But I also saw that you're going to, or you are interweaving a concept called heart mapping, which is guided visual expression. So tell us about how those two forms of creative expression can support us in different ways through your eyes.
Well, I mean, most simply, many years ago, I created a journal called Spaghetti on the Wall,
Mhm.
and that is meant to be a daily exploration with writing. And more recently, as I have been, I do spaghetti on the wall every day. And there was this day in particular where I was I just I was kind of like I was kind of like this ball of energy, but not necessarily like good energy. It just so I just was fidgety and
Mhm.
kind of just so many thoughts racing around in my head, and I thought, I I don't want to write words. Words seem so kind of insufficient
Mhm.
to kind of meet me where I was
Mhm.
this morning.
Mhm.
And I started drawing, and specifically a continuous line drawing.
Okay.
So less about creating something representational
Sure.
per se, and more about using that activity of holding a pen to paper uh, without lifting it,
Mm.
and kind of drawing what came out.
Mhm.
And I felt like I felt so much better. Number one, I was really it worked. And I thought, I'm going to create another journal that's called heart mapping,
Yeah.
because I felt like it was this direct line that was where I was able to really release all that busyness that was happening in a way that when I looked at the swirls and the loops and it just reminded me of kind of the juggling act that I had been doing in my
Mhm.
brain.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure anyone else would have seen that in my squiggles, but it was such a great reminder, because I have been so focused on writing for the
Yeah.
last, couple of years, that I was like, oh gosh, why? I mean, sometimes we forget, I feel like, or I do, these parts of myself that I love and that are so, I mean, really, I think one of the things that I felt when I was doing that continuous drawing was just how soothing it
Mm.
was.
Mm.
And yeah, so
A
I've
different kind of
created
release from the
a
words.
different kind of release.
Mm.
And there is, and because frankly, I mean, sometimes words are just, it's can be hard to find the right word. That I think about English as this, eh, you know, odd language when I compare it to, like, what I know about Japanese or German or some of these other languages that
Mhm.
have these wonderful words that, or kind of big phrase, big long words or phrases that encompass kind of a whole state of being,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
That and so, but it was such a natural thing for me to go back to drawing. But like I said, I think that, I don't know, have you ever done that where you've kind of forgotten a
Mm.
thing that you enjoyed doing, or that worked for you, and then it's like, "Oh gosh, yeah, go back to
Yeah.
that thing."
I think we just get really stuck in our heads, right? We think it has to be a certain
Yeah,
way, but really it's just about tuning in and listening, I think, and asking
yeah.
what we need, which obviously you did. And that's the result. Um, so tell us about the journal practice spaghetti on the wall. Tell us about how you came up with that name and what kind of transformation you hope it offers people.
Well, the name really came from being a little kid, and my mom was not a cook. She loved having people over, and she loved having other people cook. She's not proprietary about her kitchen in any way, shape, or form. So we had a really dear friend who was quite, I think he had done some acting in his spare time, and he was quite theatrical, and which was great fun to watch in the kitchen. And so making pasta, of course, he introduced me to this concept of, oh, the only way that you're going to know if the noodle is done and it's ready, throw it on the wall. Well, in this case, throw it on the ceiling and see if it sticks. And it really was this very, I can see the our kitchen was very yellow. It was yellow tile and kind of yellow paint. And I can see it right now with lots of windows. And so that idea has always stayed with me, that memory.
Mhm.
But then also, as I mentioned, being a person who, I call myself an experiential learner, right?
Mhm.
That where I have a tendency, or I used to have a tendency to rather indiscriminately say yes to everything, which
Mhm.
provided me with a lot of information. And some of that information I probably would be okay without, but we're not going to go there. But so it, I kind of have always been fascinated with what are those operating systems within us, right?
Mhm.
How do we make choices? How do we do that? And when I was business coaching, I noticed so many of my clients, because I got to know them really well and I'm talking to them, and they're kind of complaining about the same stuff, right? So there's patterns that are happening.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, what could be a tool that could help people, um, not necessarily change them because people have to choose to change on their own, but how could they perhaps gain some awareness
Mhm.
around kind of especially patterns, and also how could they gain awareness around what, what are the things that are really meaningful to them, right?
Mhm.
Those
Mhm.
those moments that bring joy or peace,
Mhm.
and then conversely, maybe be willing to take a look at things that don't feel so, in alignment with who
Mm.
they are. And so I created this journal. It has prompts. I mean, it has the same set of prompts. I mean, part of the way that it works is doing it with some consistency
Sure.
so
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
there is that recognition. And of course, I needed this journal myself. I was deeply, involved in making choices that were repeating patterns that I was complaining about the outcome. And
Mhm.
so it did turned out to be quite, I probably needed it the most.
Yeah.
But we're not, for myself, once I have that, even if it's just a little glimpse, but once I kind of open the door to some awareness, it's very, very difficult for me to ignore that information.
Yeah. Sure.
I mean,
Sure.
I may not know what to do with it right
Yeah.
in that moment, right?
Mhm.
But it's very, very hard for me to say, "Oh, yeah, yeah,"
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
that
it's the
I
first
didn't
step to
really do that.
change. It's the first step to change, right? If you're not aware,
Yes,
then you can't change it. So it's the
right.
first step. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that whole practice is really centered around that word that you mentioned before, curiosity. So tell us a
Yes.
bit more about how you believe curiosity interplays with our growth and our creativity.
Well, I think that I part of the way that the journal is set up, and one of the things that I think that was really important for myself is to how do I get curious about myself, uh, and in a way that doesn't reinforce kind of the negative feelings that may make me shy away from getting to know myself,
Sure.
right? I think that there's this idea that self-discovery, maybe is this this emphasis on, unearthing all the kind of the
Mhm.
negative feelings. And so I think that one of the things where curiosity in my understanding of it is allowing for a real, just I start with suggesting to people become a non-judgmental observer,
Mhm.
right? Kind
Mhm.
of think about if you want to journal about something, or even if you're reflecting about something, kind of go through it in your mind, not with all sorts of values and, this was good or this was bad or this, or you were good or you were bad, but just kind of go through it as a witness,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
so for me, curiosity was the the doorway that allowed me to think about my life, think about kind of the experiences that have happened, but also kind of the stories that I had
Mhm.
inherited,
Mhm.
and without shame, without guilt and recrimination.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that there isn't the time to hold yourself accountable,
Mhm. Mhm.
or, to be really to be honest with yourself, right?
Mhm.
But I think that I know for myself that I'm not gonna get that far. I'm not if I'm mired in humiliation or shame or guilt or, these set of feelings that, um, I'm gonna be less open,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I feel like curiosity is a way to approach this that um, can give us a more expansive way of looking at things, and maybe a release of some of that judgment that we are
Mm.
so willing to assign to ourselves in
Mm.
our actions.
And like a gentle questioning, I
Yeah,
guess. Yeah. So
yeah.
obviously, once you've got curious and you're kind of going down that path, how important do you think creative expression, whether that's writing or the art based stuff that you were talking about before, how important do you think creative expression is, to really hearing that inner voice, and living with more integrity?
Well, I mean, I think having a means of creative expression is vital. I mean,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
can't. It's kind of. I mean, it's like for me, I feel like I'm like the fish that gets asked, how's the water, and I'm like water, because creativity is so uh just interwoven into my day-to-day life.
Hmm.
And I think for a lot of people, I think we're all creative, right?
Hmm.
And in whether and I mean that in a bigger sense of the word and
Sure.
not necessarily in the strict kind of artistic
Yep.
pursuit.
Mhm.
And I I some of my workshops are based on kind of hopefully gently guiding people into recognizing their own creative paths that
Mhm.
may not be resulting in writing or a painting
Sure.
or what have you, but that I think it's so foundational to who we are as humans.
Mhm.
And then by extension, our, well, my connection to my spirituality.
Mm, mm. So what does your personal creative practice, what does that look like for you today?
Well, today it is definitely writing on the daily.
Mhm.
It is also so much of my creative world is fed by noticing and
Mhm.
observing and
Mhm.
listening.
Mhm.
So it can be listening in an urban setting. Um, I I love to eavesdrop. Uh, I love to watch people and think of, kind of sometimes make up stories of what's going on.
Sure.
It can also be observing in nature,
Mhm.
or just, I mean, so much of, I feel like it's a funny, we were talking about duality.
Mhm.
It's a funny duality in that so much of my creative practice is a a dance between noticing the tiniest detail,
Mhm.
and yet making sure that I take time to just admire the sky, right?
Mhm.
Kind of
Mhm.
having that zooming in and zooming out.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a beautiful way of putting it actually. Kind of not getting too tight about the way that you're, expressing
Yeah.
yourself creatively and being open. Yeah, it's beautiful. So for all the women who are curious about creativity as a tool for personal growth and transformation, what powerful message or question would you like to leave them with today?
I would love to ask them to consider, well, I'd love them to just acknowledge, or just for the purposes of this exercise, accept that you have a creative gift,
Hmm.
and think about what that is, that creative gift that you're sharing with the world, that you're sharing with yourself, with friends, family, and 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 it might be a challenge because you may have to think outside of the kind of artistic understanding of the word creative, but
Hmm.
to allow for, and again, that kind of is inherently that word, creativity, right? It
Hmm.
is inviting and just a expansiveness of thinking. So I guarantee you, whomever you are, you have more than one, but you definitely have at least one creative gift that take some time to name it
Mm,
and recognize um, what it kind of how central it is to your being.
that's beautiful. Get curious about it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, how can people get to know you better, Kristen, and get a real feel for the work that you're doing?
Yeah, well, my website is kristanswan.com. So that's a probably one of the best places to come and take a look. And I also post weekly on Substack as Kristan Swan.
Hmm.
And then if um, there's, but the website has it all. So
Yeah, sure.
kristanswan.com.
Well, thanks so much for coming in and chatting with me today, Kristen. Really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for this wonderful space to have a conversation like this.
Hey, Sam here. Thanks for listening to the end. If you love this episode, I would love to hear from you. Please send me a message on social media. You can find me on Instagram at Sam Horton Studio. For more episodes like this, please subscribe to my podcast, Soul-Led Creative Women, on your favourite platform. You'll find all the links at samhorton.co/podcast. The themes and tools explored in this episode feature in my new online program, Empowered Creative Soul. To find out more and join the waitlist for VIP perks when doors open, please visit samhorton.co. The direct link is in the show notes. Take care.